Let me introduce the third speaker of this morning session. She is Dr. Manjula Rajapaksa, consultant venereologist at District General Hospital, Kalutara. And she has many publications. She is going to talk on ending AIDS by 2025, the role of dermatologists.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, for that kind introduction. Good morning, everybody. So after the presentations by two professors, now I'm going to take you to a totally different topic, that is ending AIDS by 2025 and the important role you can play, the role of dermatologists. So in my presentation, I would be discussing on ending AIDS, its targets and achievements, and also the current epidemiological trends of HIV in Sri Lanka, and the important role the dermatologists can play in this ending AIDS targets. So in 2016, the UNAIDS, the world get together and set targets to end AIDS by 2030. So how they define ending AIDS is to reduce the new infections to fewer than 500,000 by 2020, and to reduce AIDS-related deaths fewer than 500,000 by 2020, and to eliminate the HIV-related stigma and discrimination by 2020. In Sri Lanka, going a step further, we want to end AIDS not by 2030, we want to end AIDS by 2025, 5 years earlier. So we think it will be a possibility because we are not a very high prevalent country. So first of all, if we think, can we end AIDS? Can we end HIV? Do you think can we end HIV? So ending HIV will not be a possibility in near future until we produce an effective vaccine for prevent HIV and a curable treatment for HIV, because ART is the antiretroviral treatment, but does is suppression of the HIV virus, not a total cure. But can we think of ending AIDS? Yes, we'll say definitely yes, because ending AIDS is a possibility. You know, HIV is not equal to AIDS. AIDS happens, the acquired immune deficiency syndrome happens at the very late stage of HIV infection when the CD4 count goes down and the patient got a severe immunodeficiency. So by early diagnosis and treatment, we can stop the patient going into AIDS stage. So how we are going to end AIDS is by this fast track 90-90-90 targets. So in the first 90, what we say is we want to get 90% of the people who are having HIV to make aware of their status, to diagnose their HIV status. And also, out of which the 90% should be linked to care and on effective HIV treatment. And out of which 90% should be totally virally suppressed with undetectable viral load. So by doing that, the 30 million people should be on treatment by 2030, and also fewer than 500,000 new HIV infections happening annually. So how treating the patients will, we can see that it can stop AIDS in that particular individual, but how can that affect the prevention of new infections? So there we call this U equals U, that means undetectable equals untransmittable. When a patient is on effective antiretroviral treatment and his viral load is undetectable, the chances of he or her transmitting the disease to the other, either sexually, mother-to-child transmission or blood-borne transmissions, comes to nearly zero. So that is why we say we go with the theme U equals U. So how it links to the care? So in the first 90, we diagnose as much as many as patients with HIV, and then in the second 90, they are linked to the HIV care and retained in the care. And third 90, they are retained and taking effective antiretroviral treatment to get effective viral suppression. So how the world has achieved this? So if we get the 2019 data, we don't have the 2020 data analyzed yet. So the world is lagging behind. So the first 90, still 81% of estimated HIV people know their status, and out of which 82 are linked to care and on treatment, and out of which 88 are on effective antiretroviral treatment and virally suppressed. What about us? So we were going to end it early, But looking at our achievements, so it is behind the world achievement. So in 2019, only 64% of our patients who are estimated to be HIV positive knew their status, out of which 80% was linked and 86% of people were totally virally suppressed. So even though we could not achieve these 90-90 targets by 2019, obviously the 2020 with the COVID crisis, the percentages will be more or less. So, but we have time, and so the target is to by 2022 to achieve these 90-90 targets to get the ending AIDS by 2025. But there is a progress we have made. You can see from 2017, only 43% knew that their HIV status, but compared in 2019, we could able to get up to 64%. So that is the progress of this 90-90-90 targets and ending AIDS goals in globally and Sri Lanka. Then I would like you to move to the trends of HIV infection in Sri Lanka. So we know, we are happy that we are still a low prevalent country with adult prevalence of less than 0.1% in adult population, even among key populations like the female sex workers, the men who have sex with men, and the drug users, and the transgender population. Still we see less than 1% of prevalence. So still we are a low prevalent country. But looking at the trend, even the numbers are low. The trend is not that favorable. It's kind of alarming trend going on. So you can see over the years, so there was a gradual increase, but now there is kind of rapid increase in newly diagnosed, that newly reported HIV cases. Among them, we can see, even though the females remain stable, female prevalence, the males, they are on a rise. So compared to 2011, there was a 460% increase in the HIV diagnosis among men. So when we look into the reason for it, you can see when we analyze the probable modes of transmission among the reported HIV infections, you can clearly see there's light blue bar, which is going up from the 2013s to up to 2019. So nearly half of the infections, the new infections we are diagnosing are among MSMs, that is from the male to male sex. So when we, prove that when we analyze the percentage of male to male transmission of HIV among the reported males, that is on the rise. So you can see now, initially heterosexually driven epidemic in Sri Lanka now has transformed into a homosexually driven HIV epidemic. And so we have done the AIDS epidemics modeling according to the data available, and it clearly says that this trend is going on. So until 2025 we had analyzed, so this yellow bar will be the predominant factor driving the Sri Lankan epidemic. So it's all over the globe, it's the same. But Sri Lanka, we thought it's what heterosexually driven initially, but now we are also going with the world trend. It is the MSM driven epidemic we are also having. And another interesting trend is now, according to the estimates, the new HIV infections, the incidences, should be going down gradually. But here, as I told you previously, the reported HIV infections are on the rise. So what is the cause of this? So in the diagnosis, so we are not only diagnosing the new infections, we are diagnosing new plus old infections. So HIV is a chronic infection. So the reason for that is when we analyze the CD4 levels, that is the CD4 cells are affected by the HIV virus, and it gradually goes down and the patient develops the immunosuppression. So when we analyze that over the years, we can see nearly half, more than 50% of people, when they are diagnosed, their CD4 level is less than 350. That is a late stage of diagnosis. And nearly 1/3 are diagnosed in the very late stage, then the CD4 count is less than 200. So they are in the AIDS stage. So that is the reason we are diagnosing many chronic HIV infections, old HIV infections. So as I said, so we are lagging behind. Just 64% of people know their status, and there's a 26% of gap is there. So what we can do, what are the reasons for it? So there are many patient factors as well as physician factors. So the patient factors may involve the lack of their knowledge about HIV and the risk of HIV, fear of stigma, the cost, access for the services, and fear of breaking confidentiality. Those things can be there. But here, today, I want to emphasize the factors, the physician factors, which can contribute to this diagnosis, late diagnosis and misdiagnosis. So first of all, we have seen not considering HIV as a cause of the illness or under the differential diagnosis, not at least at the bottom of the DD list. So what we usually see is when everything becomes negative, you do everything, and when everything is become negative, we think can that be due to HIV? And that kind of attitude we see among the physicians. The other thing is fear of causing stigma and discrimination for the patient. So sometimes the physicians say, I wanted to do the HIV test, but I thought that if I order this test, that will create the stigma and discrimination for that patient. And the other thing is the uncomfortability. They are not comfortable in taking the sexual history. Actually, I will discuss later, you don't need to go into detailed sexual history or detailed counseling. So it's not an excuse, actually. And the other thing, so the general practitioners, maybe the dermatologists, the physicians, the people who are regularly coming to them, sometimes the physicians are scared that if I order this test in this known patient to me, whether he or she lose faith on me. So he or she think that this doctor is ordering these things, why the hell kind of thing. And also in the busy clinic setups, ward setups, what the physician says, we don't have enough time to discuss in detail about this detailed counseling and such a sensitive issue. So finally, it can be a pure negligence that we don't think of HIV at all. So these can be the reasons among us, the physicians, reducing the HIV diagnosis. So to achieve these 90-90-90 goals, we should test more. So that is, testing more is the important thing. And also not stop by testing. We have to link all the positives for the proper HIV care. So when we move to your role, what is the role of the dermatologist? Sorry. So we know there is enough literature to say more than 90% of HIV-infected patients are affected by mucocutaneous complaints during the course of their disease. So more non-infectious causes with a high CD4, that is in the early stages, to more infectious causes in the latter stage, especially the viral causes like HSV, herpes zoster, and HPV infections. So there can be non-infectious causes like pruritic papular eruptions, seborrheic dermatitis, and going back to herpes zoster and candidiasis kind of things. So when we classify usually, so we classify the mucocutaneous lesions of HIV to infectious, neoplastic, and others. So you can see the whole lot of infectious causes from zoster, simplex, cryptococcal, HPV, and syphilis, the fungal infections, and neoplastic specifically, we see the Kaposi sarcoma, the lymphoma cutaneous manifestations, and squamous cell carcinoma. And in our patients, we see many other non-infectious causes like pruritic papular eruptions, eosinophilic folliculitis, seborrheic dermatitis, psoriasis, hypopigmentation, photodermatitis, these kind of things. So what is the role of you? So the significant number of patients with early HIV infection will present to the dermatologist because they are not visiting the venereologist or they are not coming to the STD clinics because what they have is some mucocutaneous manifestations, skin problems. So they will come to you. So in the stage 2 disease, where you can see the zoster patients coming with angular cheilitis and the recurrent oral ulceration. Majority are them presents with papulopuritic eruptions and seborrheic dermatitis, fungal nail infections. And moving into stage 3, also you can see the patients oral candidiasis, the OHL, and some acute necrotizing stomatitis and gingivitis. So sometimes they go into the dental side, but still sometimes it can come to you. The stage 4 disease, the chronic herpes simplex, which is going on for months, can be orolabial, genital, or anorectal. And extrapulmonary TB, the lupus vulgaris kind of things, the Kaposi sarcoma lesions can come to you. Atypical disseminated leishmaniasis, extrapulmonary cryptococcal resembling like the molluscum infection and cytomegalo infections. So these kind of cutaneous manifestations come to the general practitioners, the physicians, and the dermatologists. So to make you aware some missed opportunities, I would like to say there were few cases, my own cases at Kaluthar actually. So there was a 26-year-old housewife, a mother of one child, reported to us by the chest clinic screening. All the TB positive patients are screened for HIV. So, but when going to the history, she was ill for 1 year with pyrexia of unknown origin, loss of appetite, loss of weight, and actually a bone marrow also done at a nearest hospital. But at that time, it was missed. And she says she visited many GPs because she had a recurrent itchy skin rashes and oral thrush, and also patchy alopecia. So she has visited many GPs and the dermatologists, but HIV was not considered and the test was not offered because the physicians or the dermatologists might not think about a risk in HIV in this 26-year-old housewife who is a mother of one child, who is a housewife staying at home. So that's why I said sometimes it won't be a direct risk, but it was an indirect risk. Obviously, her marital partner was positive and revealed to be engaged in, he's a bisexual, so he had MSM partners also. And there was another 23-year-old young man, very young man, presented with cerebral toxoplasmosis when he presented with fits only after the MRIs and the things, the toxoplasmosis was diagnosed. He was severely immunosuppressed at that time. He revealed that he had pruritic papular eruptions, and when examination also we saw, and also seborrheic dermatitis, and was treated at a dermatology clinic close to his village for 6 months with monthly clinic visit, but he was never afforded because it's a 23-year-old young man coming with seborrheic dermatitis. And it may be a very, very common thing in your clinic setup, so you might not think about the risk of HIV. This one was also an interesting one. A 64-year-old man came to me after the screening was done by the rheumatologist before starting the golimumab, because he was not responding to this, his psoriatic arthritis with usual DMARDs. So before starting this drug, they want to exclude the other immunodeficiencies. So only by that screening, he became positive. So interestingly, he was also followed up in the dermatological clinic for many years and referred to the rheumatologist because of his rheumatoid arthritis. So on the diagnosis, he had extensive pruritic papular eruptions and oral candidiasis. So there are some opportunities which were not missed actually. So this case actually happened in our district. This man was also investigated for pyrexia of unknown origin, dysphagia, loss of weight, and loss of appetite. Actually, I think he was not referred to the dermatologist. The dermatologist came to see this patient when she went for something else. And looking at the patient, she said, this can be HIV, and only then the surgeon has arranged the HIV screening. So fortunately, thankful to that dermatologist, now the patient is, who was diagnosed at very late stage, now with a stable viral, undetectable viral load, doing his job and doing fine. The other thing is the association of STI and HIV. So there is a strong, very strong association between the bacterial and viral STIs and the HIV. So there are many, many literature to prove that. So what is the role of the dermatologist there? So many patients with STIs again present to the dermatologist. You may agree that herpes simplex, the HPV genital warts, and many patients with secondary syphilis usually come to you, and sometimes the molluscum contagiosum patients as well. So therefore, it is important to consider HIV and exclude HIV co-infection whenever the patient coming to you with a STI. So either you can directly test the patient, and or else you can refer to the venereologist. So there are also some missed opportunities were noted. So this man presented to the venereologist with macular non-itchy rash on the body, and also it's a scrotal rash, and also he had palms and soles. So when doing the syphilis screening, the secondary syphilis, he was diagnosed to have secondary syphilis with very high VDRL titer, but he had this non-itchy skin rash for 2 weeks and attended the dermatology clinic and obviously treated with a steroid cream. So he was not offered the syphilis and HIV serology at that stage. And the other one, this sometimes, even if you offer the STI screening, the HIV screening, they refuse. So this 36-year-old married lady found to be positive after after her partner became positive when he was diagnosed at the STD clinic. The male partner came to us with herpes lesions, but in the history, the female also had 3 episodes of genital herpes for the last 6 months and gone to the dermatologist, offered STD referral, but refused. So when only the husband was diagnosed, she came as a partner. And the opportunities are usually not missed with the genital warts, the HPV infection. You may agree, whenever you find a genital warts patient for the treatment, you refer to the STD clinic, and as a routine investigations, we do the HIV screening, and there actually we get the patients into the system. So this patient was referred saying perianal genital warts, but also he had condyloma lata also perianally, so had both secondary syphilis and HIV positive. So you may have sometimes seen this poster where we have displayed with indicators for the testing for HIV testing. So there are many dermatological conditions also mentioned. So severe or recalcitrant seborrheic dermatitis, psoriasis not answering to the normal treatment, Kaposi sarcoma, PPE, so the list is there. But any atypical thing which is not responding to your treatment, you can consider it as whether this can be due to HIV. So why it is important to improve this hospital screening by the physicians? Because we saw that only 64% of positive people are aware of their HIV status. And also alarmingly, 25 to 30%, nearly 1/3 are in the severe immunosuppressed stage when we diagnose HIV, despite being attended to the healthcare institutions several times, clinics, OPDs, ward admissions, but despite we have failed to diagnose. Why? I explained the possible reasons to you earlier. So why it is very important when we go through the positivity rates of HIV in 2019, you can see more than STD clinic screening, also the HIV rapid test done at the hospital yield the highest positivity rate, because the physicians suspect HIV and then order the test. So the possibility of it becoming positive is very high. So that is why we emphasize on this, that as physicians we should test more. So as the clinicians, what is our role? Early case finding and refer to the STD clinics. That is your role, all physicians' role. A provision of care and treatment for the HIV positives is the role of the venereologists and the STD staff. So how we are going to arrange HIV test in a hospital setting? You can either refer the patient to the STD clinic, nearest STD clinic. Many base hospitals now have STD units. Or else you can send a blood sample to the STD clinic for HIV screening. Either we can do ELISA, but if you request a rapid test, we can do HIV rapid test. So both are 4th generation tests with a very narrow window period of 21 days, 14 to 21 days. And either you can order a rapid test from the hospital, not sending the sample to the STD clinic. So all the base hospitals have HIV rapid test kits, and you can order the test, and the results will be available in 20 minutes. So you can on the spot diagnose whether the patient having HIV. So they both have good specificity and sensitivity. And the important thing is, whenever you order HIV test, please keep the patient in the ward until the report comes, or else you can, if you order a rapid test, you can call and ask whether it's positive or negative. If it is positive, actually we will go behind you and tell that this is positive, link the patient to us. If the patient need to be when it is you want beds and you want to discharge the patient, make sure that you keep a good his contact numbers, the address, all the contact details, because in case we want to trace the patient. Madam Chairperson, I will take 1-2 minutes for that. So the thing about counseling. So the many physicians say we don't have time for these detailed counseling, and we don't have time, we don't know how to do, and we don't have time. So now we are not telling counseling before testing. Now what the thing we say is testing and counseling. So it's only the informed consent. It should not be a written consent. You can inform the patient. We know for any test, even for a full blood count, ESR, fasting blood sugar, we should inform the patient. So as that physician can inform the patient that I want to exclude this and I want to do this this test. So the detailed counseling can be done by the STD staff, the venereologist, when the screening test becomes positive. So you inform the patient and do the test. If it is positive, link to the STD clinic, and then we will do the detailed counseling and go for the confirmation. So anyhow, counseling should not be a barrier for testing. So whenever you feel it, test it. So why we are saying more testing, more treatment? Now HIV is a chronic disease which can be managed very, very well with effective ART. So they can lead normal lives, normal marital lives, sexual lives, they can have children. So, and the lifespan is now, the life expectancy is nearly normal to the normal population. And also the antiretrovirals are provided free of charge by the government of Sri Lanka. So by not testing, we are violating the right of patient to care and treatment, and also contributing to the morbidity and mortality. And also we let the epidemic to grow, because if you not diagnose and not treat, they will transmit the disease to their partners and children as well. So what we want you to do is try and normalize HIV testing. Don't give a big impact on the HIV testing. It's not a big deal, so it's a normal test. Normalize the testing, and also never hesitate to test. If you feel like testing this patient for HIV, go ahead and test for HIV. So if you don't like to only to order the HIV test, bury the HIV test also in your investigation list. So in the middle of the list, you can write the HIV testing as well. And also, never get discouraged of negative results, because when we test more, we get the positive results more. And as I said, by not ordering the HIV test, we are contributing to the death of our patient despite having free and effective treatment. So we can achieve this. Some of you may know that we have achieved this elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV and syphilis. The WHO gave us the validation to Sri Lanka in 2020. So we had done that. So it's a universal testing. So we have normalized the HIV testing among pregnant women. So all pregnant women are screened for HIV. And each year we diagnose like 20-25 females. And I'm very happy to say from 2013, we have not seen a HIV positive baby born to that HIV positive mothers, because they are linked to care on effective treatment and safely delivered, and they are not HIV infected. So HIV positive mothers can have normal babies. So if we have done that, I'm sure that we can end AIDS by 2025. It's not impossible, it's an achievable goal, but that will require the commitment, courage, and compassion of all sectors, all the physicians, not only the HIV physicians, so all the physicians and the community as well. So thank you for listening, and I think, so together we can end AIDS, so it is achievable target. So I request you to test more and support us more. And also, I like to acknowledge, and on behalf of the Sri Lanka College of Sexual Health and HIV Medicine, I would like to thank Sri Lanka College of Dermatologists giving us this opportunity. And also, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Geethani Samaravira, who initiated this thing and gave us this opportunity today. And if you have any questions, I can answer. Thank you very much.
Any questions, please?
Yes. So actually, sir, in the private sector, it is they link the patients properly, because in the lab, so when you order the test, in the lab reception, they keep all the records, the patient's phone numbers, addresses. So whenever the screening test positive, what we have asked is link to the local STD clinic. So they phone, the private hospital labs call the STD clinics and inform about the patients and giving us the contact numbers. So they contact the patient as well, but unless we contact directly the patients and get them down for the confirmation. Thank you.
And I think that the point why we thought of doing this is we came to know that a lot of cases are being missed by the dermatologists. So I think it's a very good eye-opening lecture.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I think if, as Professor said, for that mycosis fungoides things, you can actually, one of the trainees can do a pilot study at the dermatology clinics among these patients to see whether there is any positive rates coming off, whether we can detect the patients. Because it will be a very good option. I think if you, one of you want to do the NSACP can actually support it.
Yeah, maybe to begin with, if we think about our recalcitrant seborrheic
That's it, yeah.
that is a very common thing.
Actually, we do the HIV test whenever it's recalcitrant, but whether we should be now doing
I think there are
common problem.
Yeah, so we don't discourage you to do, because whenever, if you want to do it as a routine test for all the dermatology clinic attendees, we can take over. It's not a burden to us, so we are happy to do that.
Protesting if we suddenly start sending HIV testing in abnormal
No, madam, if you can discuss with the lab, because our team is test more. So if you are testing more, we'll be more happy. And the rapid test kits also we have given to all base hospitals, so the stocks are there. They also will be happy to do that.
STD campaign provides the rapid
Yes, madam. Yeah. So the STD campaign supplies to all the base, the hospitals above base hospital A level. We supply.
Yeah, I think still, I mean, as a rule, we must screen for all the other STIs when you come across one STI in a patient. But that is also not being practiced in some of these places by some people. So that is one main problem.
Yeah, because sometimes the physicians, the dermatologists feel that like if I refer this patient to the STD clinic, that will cause a stigma to the patient. But because of that, we miss lot of cases. So the one thing we can do is, like, rather than telling the name of the STD clinic, you can see this doctor, refer to the venereologist. So something like that, that kind of a tactic we can do. So because even from the private sector, then we can link to the STD clinic. But now the STD phobia and this STD clinic stigmatization is not there. So we named our clinics as sexual health clinics, many of the clinics. So the traditional STD part we have removed and we are going as sexual health clinics. So people with sexual health problems, and you know that all the pregnant mothers coming, the pre-employment. So even though we don't incorporate into our government pre-employment thing, so all the private employments, the visa screening, the universities, so they have, it's a mandate to do the HIV testing. So many young crowd, it's just like a normal OPD clinic, the people are coming. So it's not that stigmatized anymore like the previous years. So actually you can ask the people to come. There are many people who are coming with their consent.
this rapid antigen test needs a venous sample. Or
No, madam, finger prick we can do. So,
you all arrange for something that can be done at the clinic level rather than sending the patients.
the thing is, actually, the rapid test kits are given to the, so it's done by the STD clinics. Whenever the high risk kind of person comes who can't wait for the 1 week ELISA test, we order a rapid test and our MLTs and our nurses do at that point. But in the hospital setup, madam, because it's in the lab and they are a bit reluctant to, they are not coming to the clinics. So, but if in a special campaign like the outreach programs, what we do, we go as a team for the key populations. You may know that the key population outreach are happening with the support of the GFATM for the MSMs, for the female sex workers, beach boys and drug users. So as a team, we go there as outreach, do the rapid test, then and there give their negative or positive results and link to our care. But in the hospital setup, usually the wards and the clinics draw the blood to the tube and send to the lab. But sometimes we can train, if you want, we can train a clinic nurse or clinic doctor to do that. So in some hospitals that is happening.
Unless we do a pilot project for about a month, you send somebody with rapid kits to our clinics and do across the board testing, or maybe the psoriatic, seborrheic dermatitis, the nodulaprurigo, that kind of population, or do and see where it works.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a possibility. Actually, you can request from the director in SACP. Actually, Dr. Geethani Samaravira is the boss of the rapid HIV testing. So she can supply the rapid test kits with some MLT for that period. Yeah, we can discuss that. Yes. So if we can have a kind of a combined study, the venereology MD trainees or the dermatology MD trainees, I think that is a doable thing.
Thank you, Manjula, for updating our knowledge on HIV and showing the opportunities missed and the opportunities used. Thank you very much. Please collect your certificate.
Thank you, Madam.
That brings us to the end of the first session for the day.